Welcome to the second in the series, The Faith of Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Years in the frozen coffin that was his Siberian cell, surrounded by hard men, and despairing at the atrophy of God in his life, but with a New Testament that blessed him with an adoration of Christ. All this melded into that helpful suggestion in prose by the poet Yeats: there is for every man one adventure which, if he would but brood over it, would lead his soul. Evidence of this is that straight after Dostoyevsky's release, he wrote a novel and got a job. Perhaps depth psychology might help us here. The human mind can be imagined as a kind of pyramid, of which the top part, the point if you like, perhaps the far smaller portion of the mind, who knows, is the conscious mind, the lower, the unconscious. In my conscious part is lodged all that I know, that 1 + 1 = 2. My parents were Emily and Arthur. Old Glory has 50 stars and 13 stripes, etc., etc. All the facts that I can recall are in my conscious mind. But below, I put that in quotes, and it may be the vastly larger part of my mind, is my unconscious mind. Here are accumulated all those influences and impressions that I've experienced since my mother's womb, though most I may not remember as facts. I can't remember, for instance, I don't know as facts, my parents' love for me before I was born, and then as a baby, and then as a lad, but that love is deeply part of me, still now, long after they're gone. Here's the point. Influences of health and sickness, of potential and impotence in my unconscious mind come up to awareness and help shape what I understand and what I do. All this is too big a subject to do more than mention here, but what I'm suggesting is that deep in Dostoyevsky, that had melded into his one adventure, including his boyhood anguish at the hurt the helpless children suffered, a helplessness on the part of their mighty God, too, apparently, the trauma in St. Petersburg Square, then icy life in a Siberian cell with vicious fellow prisoners as company, and his new devotion to Christ. All this and more he brooded over and took with him out of prison and into his new life as a novelist. But more than a novelist, he got a job as a newspaper journalist, but I'll return to that. Straight after his release, he wrote The Insulted and Injured. It's not great, but it bears Siberian wounds and tests gospel promises. A selfish man exploits meek neighbors. When they yield him their cloak as well as their coat, does it heap coals of fire on their heads? No, only the selfish benefit. Then do the meek get strengthened by their pain? No, it just tears them apart. And as one reads, one senses the author's terrible torments to believe. And more than that, years before Stevenson wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dostoyevsky wrote The Double. And it's perhaps the author who one senses has the split personality, for in his daily hack journalism job, he was shallow, bigoted, anti-Semitic, anti-Catholic, anti-everything that wasn't pro-Russian. But at night, yielding to his deep mind's immersion in a novel's emerging character and unfolding plot, he was profound. He was incredibly self-sacrificing too, paying off his relatives' debts and supporting his dead brother's family to the point of desperation. Yet he'd splurge huge sums gambling, pawning all he owned time and again. He was the patient tutor of young writers, yet a pursuer of whores who after grubby orgies sent him home like a pig, home to St. Petersburg, a city created for the Tsar's pleasure out of a swamp. What a symbol of his life. Behind the noble's splendid mansions, thousands of wretched servants lived on dregs. Often, even at 20 below, they'd no overcoats and went shivering home, exhausted, to rotten timber shacks, where Dostoyevsky now wrote Notes from the Underground. Notes from the Underground. It's a short novel, told in the first person by a man who lives in the crawl space, as it were, between the moldy floorboards and the cold earth, where there are rat smells and cobwebs and underfoot squishes. And Dostoevsky lifts a floorboard to listen to him. He's a loner, of course, there's no one else down there, so he talks to himself incessantly, half-educated, overconfident, torn by doubts, ridiculous, with raw skin, insisting on his freedom, even if it costs him or others terribly. And he won't stop talking. I'm a sick man, I'm a spiteful man. I believe my liver is diseased. I refuse to see a doctor from spite. Of course, I know I can't pay out a doctor by not consulting him, but I'm only injuring myself. It's from spite. My liver's bad? Well, let it get worse. I'm 40. I used to be in the government service. I was a spiteful official and took pleasure in it. When petitioners used to come to the table at which I sat, I'd grind my teeth at them, enjoying it when I made someone unhappy. Well, in my book, this is the first modern novel. There's nothing like it in all previous literature. There's no purpose, just rambling, convulsing confessions with embarrassing explanations. An ominous sign is that whereas even in poor folk and insulted and injured, there was a sense of God, though he was of no help, the crawlspace man and his crawlspace seem empty of God. And without a sense of God, what is humanity? They used to say a little lower than the angels, but he's just a little higher than the insects. So he has to try to define humanity anew. Man is a tyrant. Look around at the world. He loves to abuse. He's the only animal that does. His only meaning is in what he wants. Let them all die, but let me have my tea. Well, remember Frank Sinatra's I Did It My Way? Dostoevsky is struggling with what happens when a culture loses its center. It wasn't that people were atheists. Indeed, the churches were full. Creeds said, hymns sung, but in business, politics, anything that really mattered, God was left out of it. And as artists do, he focused on the desolation of one man, who seems, therefore, not to know good from bad, beautiful from squalid, What makes conduct humane or life whole? Oh, it's not true of you or your family or your church, but it's increasingly true of our culture. Watch a TV sitcom and ask in what sense it portrays a nation under God. The Crawl Space Man is an exposure of our reality, honest and profound. He confesses, 50 years before Freud, a whole gamut of crucial psychological problems. For instance, tell me, why does it happen that in the very minute I'm really feeling all that's good and beautiful, I do such ugly things? You laugh? My jests are of course in bad taste. That's because I don't respect myself. He tells of his dreams in which he was a hero, whereas in fact he was a forlorn, silent, miserable, wanting to be hurt. He knows himself every minute to be many opposite things. Yet the Crawl Space Man wants to be healed and wants his healing to be through Christly love, of course. In his underground life, he knows only one place to find love, in a brothel. There he meets Lisa, one of those lost legion of girls who, under Tsarism, in order to stay alive, have only one profession. In their transaction, the Crawl Space Man inevitably insults her brutally, and then he blurts out an invitation to visit him in his basement. Because Lisa is a decent, understanding girl, she comes. She offers him a kind of grace. But as it happens, he's just done something shameful, and he takes it out on her, calling her a whore. Even when she's gentle, sensing the pain under his cruelty, she tries to comfort him. Again, he can choose, but because hurt proves his freedom, because it's hurt he's used to, he curtly offers her the price of her body. When sadly she goes, he anguishes over what might have been, but it's too late. Anyway, if she comes back, he'll only hurt her more. So in Notes from the Underground, Christly compassion, for that's what she offered, fails to heal the distorted man who is without God. And as for Dostoyevsky, he now found himself enslaved, that's his metaphor, by a big work he'd call Crime and Punishment. And that's what we'll tackle next time.